Many times finding a good mobile MMORPG to play can feel like an almost impossible mission. Most of them end up failing very quickly, and of course there are also those games that are completely automatic. But my friend, you came to the right video. I'm going to show you some MMORPGs that I'm sure you will take a closer look at, so as you already know, just leave a like and come with me. ROM Golden Age is a medieval fantasy MMORPG for Android, iOS and PC that tries to bring back the classic formula of old school MMORPGs. Let's talk about it now. The game is heavily focused on maximizing your character's progression and of course the famous endless grind. Besides that, the game features constant battles between players where you can encounter enemy players throughout the map. The story takes place on the continent of Calderas, a huge fantasy territory where players are constantly fighting for power. I think the biggest difference in this game is the feeling that the world is in an endless state of conflict where you can end up fighting another player at any moment. It is a game that did not become as popular on mobile, but it is definitely worth checking out. I think this game is one of my favorites from this list, and it is also one of the ones I have played the most. Let's talk now about TORAM Online, and there are many differences in TORAM Online that are really worth mentioning, but one of the biggest ones is the fact that the game does not have a class system. This means you don't need to create multiple characters. You can use just one character and simply change their weapon whenever necessary, as well as their abilities. The game also has a slow and complicated progression system where the maximum level of your character goes beyond 200. The game does not have any automatic features, and I would say it follows a much more hardcore MMORPG style. If you are tired of easier MMORPGs on Android, this is a great option. TREEVERSE is an isometric fantasy MMORPG created with the idea of bringing an experience similar to the great classic MMORPGs, but adapted for mobile and PC with cross-platform support. The game takes place in the world of Arboros, where players explore open regions, fight monsters, collect resources, and try to reach the mysterious World Tree. The game tries to deliver a more challenging and detailed experience where you need to survive with your character in a slightly different way. You need to build your own house, create your own equipment, upgrade weapons, and defeat many monsters to gather the resources needed for all of this. It is a kind of mix between an MMORPG and a survival game. An MMORPG that has a simply brilliant idea. Let's talk now about Villager and Heroes. In this game, the world is constantly at war. You need to defeat all the monsters that appear all the time, but the interesting part is that you can be both a hero and a kind of NPC in the game, but you can create your character as a powerful warrior and go into battles, but if you want to simply become a sword merchant, you can do that as well. You could say that the game really changes the traditional MMORPG formula, almost adding a management system depending on your choices. It is a very different MMORPG, and it is definitely worth checking out. One of the oldest MMORPGs available on the Play Store. Many people don't even know this, but this game was released back in 2011. Let's talk now about WASPEAR Online. WASPEAR Online takes place in the world of Arena, a fantasy continent where two major alliances are at war. Of course, this gives the game a very interesting dynamic since you can constantly encounter characters from the opposing faction and naturally fight against them. Even though it is a pixel-style game, it has many different areas spread throughout the world for you to explore. Many people say it is one of the games that comes closest to World of Warcraft on Android. The game features different classes to choose from, PvP, guilds, and player trading. It is definitely one of the most complete MMORPGs on our list. One of the most different MMORPGs on this list with a very interesting world and unique classes. Let's talk now about NAICA Reborn. The adventure takes place on the continent of Lazul, starting in the village of Azura, where the player begins their journey. The game gives you complete freedom to explore several open areas, cities, villages, creatures spread across the map, and many things to collect. The game does not have a traditional class system. You can create a kind of hybrid character by mixing different types of abilities. However, what really stands out are the races, which are a mix of animals and humanoid beings. The game has a very unique style and is nothing like those generic MMORPGs. Among so many massive MMORPGs that are released on Android, an indie MMORPG is trying to find its place in the spotlight. Let's talk now about OHARION. I think without a doubt one of the best parts of this game is the fact that it was made by other players who of course also enjoy MMORPGs. For example, the game does not have any kind of pay-to-win system. It is very focused on PvP, the progression is a little easier, it has an open world for you to explore, and it is also a very intuitive game. Unlike other huge games, this one has a smaller community, but one that is extremely passionate about the game. If you are looking for a different MMORPG with a very dedicated community, this is the game you are looking for. Finally, we got the release of a Ragnarok server without pay to win, and we are going to talk about it now. Ragnarok Origin Classic. And honestly, I wouldn't completely trust the Ragnarok company because of their history. The idea of having a server that is completely free from pay to win is simply brilliant. And no, I'm not talking about the fact that they shouldn't make money. They can still make money. The real problem is when pay to win starts affecting the PvP experience of the game. Honestly, I thought they would change something, bringing the game much closer to the old school Ragnarok experience. But the truth is that this game is basically just a normal Ragnarok Origin, but with the proposal of being completely free from pay to win. And it is definitely a game that is worth playing. There are several different MMORPG concepts, and this is actually one of the interesting parts of getting to know all of them, and this one is very different. Let's talk now about Raven 2. This is a Korean MMORPG, which means it focuses a lot on character creation, and honestly, the character creation system in this game is really beautiful. It also feels almost like a story mode experience. However, of course, the reason this MMORPG became famous is something else. The female characters are simply a little more attractive than usual, and not only that, the game has a system where you can change outfits and completely transform your character. Of course, now they really went all in with these outfits. There are many different ones, and honestly each one looks better than the last, but I can tell you that even with that, it is still a very complete MMORPG. This is the game that became extremely popular in the 2000s, mainly because it brought a different theme of science fiction and warfare between factions. Let's talk now about RF Online next. Unlike other games on our list, this one is a completely remastered version, specially created for Android. The game takes place in a future where humanity has advanced technologically to the point of replacing parts of their own bodies with machines. The story revolves around major conflicts between factions that fight for resources and control of the universe. You could say that this is an RPG that replaced swords and magic with giant robots, futuristic weapons, and advanced technology. And even though it is a continuation of an old MMORPG, it still tried to bring many new ideas and innovations. Another extremely impressive MMORPG that has been active on the Play Store for more than 10 years. Let's talk now about Evil Lands. Surprisingly, when you enter the game, there are still many people playing. It is truly a very loved game by its community. Because it is an older game, it does have some limitations like the class system, for example. There are only 3 classes for you to choose from. The game also progresses at a slower pace, both in character evolution and in improving your equipment. However, for those who enjoy a more classic MMORPG experience, this game is simply perfect. Even graphically, it really looks like an old school MMORPG. If you're really looking for an older MMORPG to play on your Android, you need to know FLYFF Universe. It is a modern version of the classic FLYFF Online, bringing back the same colorful world, the flying system and character progression, but with improvements to work on PC, mobile and browsers. The adventure takes place on the continent of Madrigal, a world full of cities, fields, dungeons and creatures called Masker Pets. Since this is an MMORPG from the 2000s, it still has many of those classic elements like an endless grind where you defeat tons of enemies, many active PC players, several maps to explore, and that simple but very well made MMORPG experience. It's definitely worth checking out. When talking about Guild Wars, it's easy to recognize it since it is one of the most famous and one of the best MMORPGs ever made, but this version ended up being released for Android. Let's talk now about Guild Wars Reforged. Guild Wars Reforged is a renewed version of the classic Guild Wars, one of the most important MMORPGs from the 2000s. The idea is to bring an older MMORPG experience into a mobile format, something that the platform usually is not used to. The game takes place on the continent of Tyria, a fantasy medieval world where different races and factions fight for power. It features an extremely strategic skill system, a campaign full of story, and one of the most respected PvP systems in the genre. With updated graphics and also arriving on mobile devices, it can be a great entry point for new players. Honestly, I don't know if this game could really be classified as an MMORPG, but even so, I'm going to include it. Let's talk now about HELLGUARD. I think this game is much closer to an online RPG, but you can find other players in the game world, and maybe that is what turns it into an MMORPG. The game has different classes for you to choose from with more than 10 options, and all of them are very different from each other. Even though the game has an open world for you to explore, most of the focus is inside the dungeons where you need to explore either alone or with other players. Actually, this game is very focused focused on cooperative gameplay. It's basically a dungeon crawler but with improved graphics, not that classic isometric style for example. It's a very different game and maybe one of the most unknown MMORPGs available on the Play Store. This is definitely one of the best looking MMORPGs when it comes to graphics on the Play Store. Let's talk now about KAETRAM Online, and this is a game that is usually hidden inside the Play Store. It is of course more popular on PC and it also features crossplay. The idea is to create a simpler experience but focused on exploration, character progression and the freedom to play your own way. The game does not have many major differences. It has for example an open map where you can walk wherever you want, meet other players along the way, search for new equipment and slowly improve your character. It is not an MMORPG that tries to reinvent the wheel, but it is the kind of RPG that does everything very well, and that is exactly what makes it work so well. This MMORPG is truly impressive because it has been active for more than 10 years. Let's talk now about Celtic Heroes. The first thing you need to understand about this game is that it follows a more classic MMORPG style. And honestly, this is a really good thing because the game does not have any kind of automatic system and in fact it can be quite challenging. The game features a slower paced combat system similar to World of Warcraft, and of course the progression system is also slower, requiring you to spend a lot of time developing your character. The game takes place in Celtic mythology, which honestly is something I don't know much about, but it is a classic and very well made MMORPG. There is a genre within MMORPGs, especially on mobile, that focuses a lot on simulation. Let's talk now about Dragon Raja. Unlike many games on our list, this one does not focus on a medieval system or anything futuristic. In fact, I would say it feels much more normal. You can find buildings and entire cities throughout the game. The story of Dragon Raja revolves around the hybrids, humans who have dragon genes and special abilities. The player enters a war against the return of a powerful creature known as the Dragon Lord. This game is especially known for having a very strong social system where you can participate in races, cook different dishes, take photos, join events to meet other players, have a career system and many other different activities. For those who have ever wondered why there isn't a Pokemon style MMORPG, the truth is that this type of game actually exists. Let's talk now about Duel Revolution. Well, the game does not have many secrets. You will create your character and choose one of the 3 starting Pokemon. After that, you enter an open world full of other players and of course Pokemon for you to train and evolve. The interesting part is that the game has many wild Pokemon, which are the ones that will give you XP and items. You can also cooperate with other players. Besides that, the game also features a story mode for you to follow, even though it is an MMORPG. And I think the only major downside of this game is that it does not have the Pokemon name attached to it. I'm honestly not sure if this can exactly be considered an MMORPG because of how the game works, but even so, let's talk about Dungeon Cross Relic Hunter. I really like the graphic style of this game. The pixel art is very beautiful and works really well for an MMORPG. Unlike other games where you create your own character, here you have several pre-made characters which are basically the game's classes, but there are only 6 in total. After that, you enter the game world alongside other players, and of course there are several dungeons and areas for you to explore. The combat system also feels a lot like a roguelike, but in a much more cooperative format. Many people don't know this, but this game can indeed be considered a good MMORPG, and that's exactly why it is here on the list. I simply love this MMORPG because it works in a very intuitive way. Let's talk now about ETERSPIRE. This game does not have any automatic systems, but it is a game that is very easy to understand. For example, after creating your character, you are immediately placed in an area where you need to start progressing, and as you move forward in the game, it guides you to the places where you need to be. Of course, the game has an open world for you to explore, many cooperative features, dungeons, and several other activities. However, it is truly an impressive game because it manages to be very easy to understand while still having a highly complex progression system. I honestly had a lot of prejudice before trying this game, but I ended up being surprised by how good it actually is. Let's talk now about Aris, the Iron Vanguard.
Your threat level. We need to be cautious.
Unlike the fantasy MMORPGs that dominate the market, it focuses on a mix of science fiction, fast-paced combat, and an aesthetic that feels similar to console games. The game takes place in the year 3400 during a war for control of the solar system, where players take on the role of a guardian, a warrior equipped with advanced armor who fights against a threat known as Nemesis. Ares, the Iron Vanguard, is a futuristic action RPG that replaces swords and magic with advanced armor, giant robots, and space battles. Its biggest highlight is the real-time suit switching system, allowing players to combine different combat styles during battles. And since its launch, this game has been quite controversial, but the truth is that looking at it today, it is a very complete MMORPG. Let's talk about Blue Protocol. The game takes place on the continent of Regnus, a world full of forests, mountains, deserts, and cities to explore. The combat happens in real time, similar to games like Genshin Impact or Tower of Fantasy, but in an MMORPG format. The game gives you complete freedom to explore the world, and believe me, there are many different biomes and interesting things for you to discover. Each class has its own abilities, dodges, combos, and special attacks. In addition, you can change your combat style as you progress, making boss battles much more dynamic. The truth is that the game does not have one big highlight. It is simply a well-made MMORPG that does the basics very well. Imagine the idea of an MMORPG, but at the same time being a roguelike. Yes, that's exactly what this game managed to do, and we are going to talk about it now. Its name is Born Again Online, and it really managed to combine these two genres in a way that works very well. You can find other players in the game's open world, but whenever you face enemies, you enter random dungeons to level up your character and do the famous grind. However, there is something really interesting about this game, and that is the fact that it has permadeath. This idea is pretty crazy because it goes against the traditional concept of an MMORPG. And yes, it is completely possible to lose your character if you randomly die to a boss. Of course, there are ways to avoid this, but this is definitely one of the best parts of the game. And that's the list. These are some of the best MMORPGs you can play on mobile right now. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more gaming content. See you in the next video.